Alrighty. Just stand by for me here 1 second, guys, and I will join you shortly to give you an update on Tropical Storm Ian. The 2 p.m. advisory is now in, but just give me 1 second here to get this computer situated. Bear with me, folks. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Meteorologist Samara Cokinos, here to bring you an update. The 2 p.m. update on Tropical Storm Ian. I really appreciate you guys hanging in tight with us while we got that situated. A little technical formality, so to speak. So, as of the 2 p.m. advisory, we do have winds at 50 miles per hour, gusting at 65 miles per hour. It does look like Tropical Storm Ian is beginning to be a little bit better organized compared to earlier runs. So what we're looking at with this particular storm, as it's moving now west-northwest at 12 miles per hour, it's starting to take that turn along the tropical ridge. So what we're going to be noticing over the next 12 to 24 hours is definitely a lot more organization with this system, as well as strengthening with this system. So just to let you guys know, I will be getting to some questions throughout this, but it'll be at the end. So I'm just going to go through everything, and then I'll go back and address more questions near the end of the presentation. So let's get right into it. And you'll notice that the pressure, it hasn't really changed all that much. It's gone down just a smidge, but really nothing too significant at this point. So when we look at the satellite imagery of Tropical Storm Ian, you'll notice that the convective bands are starting to actually show a little bit better up on the actual imagery. So what we're looking at is the curvature in those convective bands, and the curvature shows signs that, yeah, it's starting to get a little bit better organized, which is to be expected as it moves into more favorable conditions. We started seeing favorable conditions last night whenever the shear has just dropped considerably. I mean, it's little to no shear whatsoever. Plus, it's also going to move into warmer water. So that's going to give it the fuel that it needs to really start to ramp up, and now possibly becoming a hurricane by early tomorrow morning. So as we take a look at the track still hasn't updated from 11. The next track update will come at 5 o'clock this evening, but I still want to show it to you. It does have the 2 p.m. advisory information on there about the storm, so it'll always update in between the track updates with that information. So as we look forward, you'll notice that basically what's going to happen later on tonight, we're going to start to see this system start to really pick up better organization, which is signs that it'll go through rapid intensification, which we are expecting it to potentially now reach a Category 3 hurricane status before it moves either over or just to the west of the western tip of Cuba. So you'll notice that, yes, it'll continue to strengthen after that as well. So let me put this back in motion for you. And you'll notice as it moves into the southeastern Gulf early Tuesday, what we're looking at is it continuing to strengthen to a Category 4 status, and it has everything to do with the environment in the southeastern Gulf. We're talking about even warmer water temperatures. So we'll go from temperatures around 83 or 84 degrees over Cuba, and then as it moves into the southeastern Gulf, that's where we'll actually see those temperatures rise up to about 86 degrees, really just enhancing this system as it continues a more northward trend Tuesday before it kind of swings back a little bit. So what we're looking at with this track, you'll notice that as I put it into a closer view in just a minute of Florida, the general cone with this on the day 4 and day 5 outlook is still very broad at this point. So that tells us that, yes, there's still data coming in, but like I mentioned last night, if you joined us, the center of circulation, which is getting better right now, is what that model data latches onto in order to project the cone a little bit better and more accurately. So the more accurate that information is coming in from the hurricane hunters, the better this cone is going to start to look. And it's already started to look even better in terms of the width of this particular cone. You'll notice it's a little bit more narrow as it approaches Cuba, but then it kind of fans back out as we get into the latter portion of the forecast. So until we start to see, again, more information coming in from the hurricane hunters, which improves that model data, we're still going to see a good portion of Central Florida and Florida in that cone of uncertainty for now. Notice that this particular model does, or the track model does, keep it as a Category 2 before making landfall potentially early Thursday going in through the day. And then it kind of weakens from there by Friday morning. So we're talking about getting closer to the coastline on Thursday and then potentially making landfall possibly as a Category 2 or 1 somewhere along the coast of Florida. So I know there's been a lot of questions as to, exactly what are the impacts and what are the main threats here in Florida. But unfortunately, until this cone gets a little bit more narrow, those impacts are going to change, and so we are not really putting direct impacts for certain cities in Florida, in Central Florida, just yet, because it has the potential to change. So when we are looking at this particular track model, guys, I want you to not really pay attention to just that center line, because that whole cone going back from the east to the west, okay, the outline of this cone is where the potential of the center of this storm could go. So when we're talking about impacts, if this particular storm actually makes landfall on the far western periphery of this particular cone, then our impacts here in Central Florida will be a lot less depending on the size of the storm at that time. If it's shifted a little bit more east, then we're going to see greater impacts here in Central Florida. So that's really why this particular cone being so large is just pretty much incorporating everywhere that has the potential to see some impacts right now. But the specifics of those impacts will come later today. I'm thinking later today, but mainly tomorrow. So when we talk about, the rapid intensification of the storm, you see the tropical cyclone heat potential, and you see that deep red and orange as it heads into getting closer to Cuba. So it's going to pass to the southwest of Jamaica tonight, and then we're also going to see impacts to the Caymans, where they do have hurricane warnings, as well as Cuba, before this moves into the southeastern Gulf on Tuesday morning. So I'll go over those impacts in just a minute. But when we look at the heat associated with the potential to make this storm rapidly intensify, it's definitely there. You see the high and very high conditions in the water that it's moving in. So, and if the actual track keeps it offshore of Cuba, just to the west, or just over that little western tip of Cuba, it's not going to interact much with land. So we're talking about a lot more interaction with the water. It's going to continue to fuel that system as it moves into the southeastern Gulf early on Tuesday. Currently, what we have here, and I'm going to take my image off really quick here in a minute, maybe not. Anyway, what we're looking at is we have hurricane warnings in the red. That is for Grand Cayman as well as western Cuba. And then you'll notice the purple or that blue color over central Cuba. That is a tropical storm warning at this point that is in place. And you'll also notice a yellow on the map. That is the smaller Caymans. They're under that tropical storm watch. So they could still feel those tropical storm impacts. But what we're going to is about the timing for those particular areas. They'll start to feel them starting tomorrow night. When we're talking about as it passes southwest of Jamaica and getting closer to the Caymans by early tomorrow, that's when they're going to start to feel those impacts. So hurricane force winds for Grand Cayman, tropical storm conditions potentially there for the smaller Cayman Islands. And then as it gets stronger and approaches Cuba, you'll notice that highlighted red area once again where they could feel hurricane conditions, I would say reaching the potential for a major hurricane, obviously, as it reaches that Category 3 status before it actually crosses over. We're talking about Monday night going into early Tuesday morning for Cuba. So, and additionally, they're going to see quite a bit of rainfall there too. So I broke down a lot of the rainfall potential here. So just give me 1 second here. So you guys can see this a little bit better here. I will be answering more questions near the end of this presentation, just to let you guys know. So we're talking about Jamaica seeing anywhere between 3 and 6 inches of rain and up to 8 inches in isolated maximum areas. The Caymans pretty much the same, but when we get to western Cuba, that goes up to anywhere between 6 and 10 inches with isolated maximums up near 16 inches of rainfall for western Cuba. I would say closer to 6 inches for central Cuba, but we're talking about the Keys, South Florida, and potentially central Florida seeing anywhere between 2 and 4 inches with isolated maximums up to 6 inches. And as of right now, folks, that's a really early call. So we're talking about seeing rainfall potential. Again, it really depends on where this system heads inside that forecast cone, what type of impacts we're going to be seeing here locally. Let's take a look at the models real quick, and you'll notice that the tightening of the models are getting a little bit better, and that's because the center of organization with this particular storm is starting to become more defined as of right now. So what we're looking at is a tighter band as associated with the models, but then once we get beyond Cuba, you notice they start to spread out once again, and they actually have jogged back a little bit toward the east. So we're not... You remember yesterday and throughout today with meteorologist Troy Bridges, he said, there would be that jogging pattern back and forth that we see over the next couple of days. And that is typical, folks. When we get into that extended model outlook, we're talking 4 and 5 days, the models are not going to be in agreement as much as they are earlier in that forecast period, because there's still a lot of data that we have to collect from the hurricane hunters in terms of what the environment is like for that steering pattern that could drive the system in. So we'll continue to see the fluctuation of these models kind of go back and forth, but it's still, the majority of the model data is still on a westward shift, even though we have obviously the Euro still staying a little bit more east, while the GFS again staying a little bit more westward. So when we talk about the steering pattern, I'm going to go in this real quick, and I have a couple more things. I have one more graphic after this, and then I'll get to some questions. We talk about that steering pattern. This is the jet stream, okay? This is what drives all of our weather around the world, basically. So what we're looking at is that dip in the jet stream has the potential and is going to continue to lift this storm a little bit more northward into the southeastern Gulf of Mexico by Tuesday morning. From there, what we're looking at potentially is, of course, how strong and how far south that jet stream is going to dip and how quickly it's moving. So it will determine if Ian actually gets pulled to the east, or if it's still a little bit slower in making that westward shift, that west-northwest shift, which we've begun to see already. That's where we could potentially see it go a little bit further to the north. So again, it has everything to do with how strong this dip is, and exactly the timing and the quickness of it will determine how quickly that system gets picked up. So as of right now, this is basically what we're looking at. We're looking at a better organized system. It's only going to continue to get better organized as we head into later on tonight. We will see that potential for rapid intensification to at least a hurricane status by early tomorrow morning before it continues to strengthen there. Reaching potentially that Category 3 status before it gets just to the western portion of Cuba. Now, the impacts are definitely going to become more evident for Central Florida basically by Monday. So that's where we're going to start to see, again, more solidified data coming in from the hurricane hunters that will help the model data, and it'll be able to kind of give us a better idea as to what we could expect here. In terms of rainfall, though, I did tell you anywhere between about 2 and 4 inches of rainfall. Again, isolated maximums could go up to 6 inches, but the thing about it is that could all change if it shifts farther west, we'll see less impacts. If it shifts farther or closer east, then definitely some bigger impacts there. So I'm going to put it back here on the track because a lot of people like to see the track before I go into some questions here. There's a bigger view for you. So I'm going to get over here and look at some questions. Hi, Sam. Are the Hurricane Hunter's most recent update going to be included in the 5 p.m. update, and how recent? With their actually Sparky's Cove on YouTube Live. Yes, this information has actually been included in this 2 p.m. advisory. So there will be another flight. I don't know the exact time. I believe it's potentially 5 o'clock this evening that we'll see another Hurricane Hunter go out, and it would be included as soon as they make it available to as soon as the information comes back in from that flight. So if anything, if it's not available right at 5 and they're still collecting that data, then it'll be available during the 8 p.m. advisory. Let's see. Oh man, these are moving fast. I'm trying to scroll through a lot of the questions to try to read them, and every time I go to read them, they're moving. So bear with me here. I'm working on it. They haven't found a true center of the storm. Will get better direction after they find it. Correct. Yeah, the actual center, the true center, has yet to really be defined. But the thing about it is the center of the storm is getting a little bit more well organized. So we're starting to see those convective bands start to kind of take that curvature shape, which is indicating that it is becoming a better organized system, and we should start to see a more definitive center throughout the day going into tonight, which of course then would lead to better model data as it latches onto that center and really kind of is able to give a better projection as to what we could continue to see as far as the track is concerned. So, I'm flying from Orlando on Tuesday morning from San Juan. Should I cancel the flight? Amanda on YouTube Live was asking me if she should cancel her flight. I would not go canceling any plans right now. I mean, I would definitely watch your airline for that information to see if that's something that, they're going to be canceling. So that would be something to kind of monitor with your airline. Right now, Orlando is in the cone, and I don't believe, Tuesday is going to be impacted at this point because it'll just be moving into the southeastern Gulf. However, depends a lot on the airlines, what they do with that kind of information. That's for them to make that call, but I don't believe that Tuesday this week is going to be a problem for you. Let's see. No storms today or tomorrow. Simon on Facebook Live was asking, no storms for today or tomorrow. There are going to be a few scattered showers and thunderstorms today. It'll be from about Orlando to the south and east, so over southeastern Brevard. A good portion of Brevard County will see some scattered showers and thunderstorms today, as well as Osceola County, but a lot of that activity could spread a little bit further north going into Orlando as well throughout the day. So don't be surprised if you see a few showers or thunderstorms picking up throughout the afternoon. I got about 5 minutes left here. Okay, Steve Hanna wants to know, why is the storm giving us such a hard time knowing what it's going to do? Is it the fronts or the wind or the shear? Thanks. You know what, Steve, every hurricane does this. And the thing about it is I think the reason why it seems like it's being a little more difficult is because of all the information that is readily available on social media. So we go through this every hurricane where we start to see, the model data go from very broad to very limited information. And that has everything to do, again, with that. Once it latches onto that center core, that's when it starts to get better information from the hurricane hunters into that model data, and we start to see more of a consensus as far as the models are concerned. So we actually go through this with a good portion of the storms. So it just, is one of those things when you get to that 4 and 5 day outlook, there's always going to be that broad area until we start to get more detailed information on the storm as it progresses through that forecast period. What about Lake County and preps and any preps needed? You know, when it comes to specific stuff for Central Florida folks, the only areas currently out of the cone, which I'll show you in this zoomed in view one more time here, you can see southernmost Brevard County and a little slither of southeastern Osceola County currently out of that cone. The rest of Central Florida going back into the Panhandle, well in that cone, folks. So I'm not going to say that even that southeastern area of Brevard and Osceola shouldn't be prepared, okay? As well as the portions of Lake County. So everybody in Central Florida should just be at least prepared for some type of impact, you know, but I wouldn't go panic buying or anything like that. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but, you know, just being prepared is the best situation because, again, with that cone, don't focus on the center of the track. I need you to actually look at both sides. The outline, the full outline of that cone is where the potential for the center of the storm has to go, okay? The far eastern portion would be more favorable for the European model, whereas the far western portion is more favorable for the GFS models. And everything in between is kind of shifting, again, back to the west, but it has jogged a little bit east earlier today. So what we're looking at, even if the center of that storm follows this current track, we could still see impacts here in Central Florida, but they would be definitely different, a lot more different, if that storm moved to the far western periphery of that cone versus the far eastern half of that, where we would see major impacts, okay? So just being prepared is definitely a good way to be, so. No problem, Terry. A couple more, let's see. Brandon's telling me I only got like a minute or so left. Moves quickly. Another thing to keep in mind as well is the significance of storm surge. If you have family or friends in Cuba, the significance of the storm surge is going to be great. With this storm, we're talking about 9 to 14 feet above normal tide levels for Western Cuba, starting on Monday night going into Tuesday. So definitely keep that in your mind, in addition to the potential to see flooding. The flooding with the potential for rain in Western Cuba is 6 to 10 inches with isolated maximums up to 16 inches. And that does, in areas with higher terrain, that could cause some mudslides as well as the flash flooding potential for Western Cuba. So we'll definitely be watching that as it is expected to reach that Category 3 status or major hurricane status before it even gets to Cuba at this point. Okie dokie. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for now. I'll be back, or either myself or Chief Meteorologist Tom Sorrells will be back here at 5 o'clock for another update, or shortly after 5. So we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us, everyone.